You made it. You made it.
But I made it. That's all that really matters, right? How you feeling?
Good, good. I'm here in the Galilee, enjoying a nice little sunset in front of me. No complaints.
I want to be
No
where you are
complaints.
right now, Doc.
You're in the Tel Aviv area?
Right now I'm in Ramadan, yeah. Tel Aviv area,
Okay,
Ramadan.
cool, cool. That's
It's about
part
the
of
same
Greater
thing.
Tel Aviv, I guess, yeah. So Beato, maybe let's get the recording going. So to whoever's here in Ashriel, we are gonna record this and upload it. But for now, it's just a conversation with the private community. Ashriel, before we get started, I started telling them about New World Passover and how I visited. So I
Mm.
wanted to show them a photo
Did you show
from
them
New
already?
World. No, I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Uh, are the people who are on here, are they in Israel? Is it a possibility that maybe they can come to New World next month?
Maybe let's put the invitation
I'm
out
here.
there. I'd like to come. So yeah, some people are here. That we have it's a group of Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, and all types from around the world. But yeah, real quick, we'll start by sharing this just to lighten up the mood. That's me, Julian, and Shammai. We didn't have the fresh outfits. They gave us, they gave us whatever outfits they had. But grateful to get the outfits. That back when I had hair. Here's me and Julian destroying a quarter of a watermelon, which it's a lot. It's a lot of watermelon,
That's
but we got to try.
back in the day, 2015 that was.
Yeah, exactly.
A good 10 years, bro. A
Anyways,
good 10 years. He said,
great memories. Great memories from that time. So yeah, maybe we give people a little bit of our history. I guess you and I know each other from our clubbing days, right? I was a club promoter, party producer. You were an attendee, and we clicked. We clicked. We became friends. I had the privilege of seeing you coming to visit your community in Dimona. I got the privilege of getting to see you get married. I even got
yes,
one of those no,
Shama.
what's it called?
The Shama.
Shama, yeah.
Right, right.
What do you want to explain what the Shama is? I know we're starting in the middle, but since we're on this topic, what was the Shama? Because till today, I don't know how to explain it, but I take immense pride in that moment. Just so you know.
So whenever somebody gets married, it's a custom that we want to promote the institution of marriage, right? So those friends of ours who are still either in the stage of courting, dating, or who are single, we want to try and push them, to towards the institution of marriage. And so when you pass out the shama, it's kind of like when a woman throws the bouquet of flowers behind her, and whoever catches them, it's like a boost of good luck, so that you can be next in line. And so when we pass out the shama, we're passing them out to those people who we hold near and dear to our hearts, and we hope and pray that they'll be next in line for getting married. So when we pass out the shama, you choose people um, very methodically, and you want to make sure that they're receiving it in the midst of everybody else. So that now you have all of these other people who are who are there in attendance and who know that, okay, this brother or this sister is either single or haven't entered into the institution of marriage just yet, and so let it be known to all that this may be a possible prospect for you. So I wanted to give you that. Now I don't know, I got married a few years ago, and so you're still not married. So let's go. I mean, unless you just
Yeah,
wasted
I'm
the shot.
not. Don't worry, I still have it.
Okay.
It doesn't expire that soon, right?
No, you got a little time. You got a little
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
but you can't hold it forever though.
That's that fair. It's same conversation I have with my grandfather. When am I getting married? And right, he's got like 50 great grandchildren. He should chill. Like it's all good.
I
But it'll
think that's one
come.
of the greatest. That's one of the greatest um, events and experiences that a family could experience, especially fathers, mothers, and grandparents, to see their children get married. I think my mother told me, because my father, he passed away a long time ago, right? So he didn't get a chance to see me graduate. He didn't get a chance to see me go through college, the military, getting married, having a new baby. But my mother always says that, that she takes pride in that, that she
Mm,
was able to be here throughout, every one of these phases of life, which are so important to us, that she was able to be here and to experience that alongside me. So I can understand, even if you have 100,000 grandchildren, it's still that one who is not married yet, who you still
right.
looking for to get married. So, it's it's some good
Yeah,
stories, man.
I'd say
Everybody's
give
in
me
on the
like
conversation.
give me another half decade to a decade, you know? I'll, anyways, another funny moment. I was shocked to hear my name get called because it seemed like it was all your childhood friends and stuff. So I wasn't expecting to hear my name. But once your name gets called, you literally need to come up to the middle and dance. You
Right?
need now without perpetuating any stereotypes. You and you and your friends dance real well. So I was intimidated, but I will say you uploaded a video of it and tagged me, and I shared it, and I got a few compliments. So while I don't think I quite match the level of your friends, I held my own.
You did a
So
good
that's
job.
there we
I
go.
think you did a good job. I mean,
I appreciate
some
that.
of the stereotypes are correct, for some people. Um, I think you kind of rose to the occasion, I would say.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, enough Burning Mans, enough festivals, been there, And yeah, I'm all for perpetuating like positive stereotypes about different groups, as long as it's positive, you know.
There's nothing wrong with positive stereotypes. I mean, so long as they're true. If they're not
Exactly,
true, then
exactly. Anyways, so Ashriel, let's get into this. I do want to talk to you about a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is kind of just like whenever I mention that I'm going to have you on, people hear Hebrew Israelites and there's a reaction, right? I think the reaction when a lot of people think of Hebrew Israelites, they don't see what I see because I've gotten to the Hebrew Israelites I know are friends I've met throughout the years. I got to see your community. I think what they're responding to is people who are on the streets in Chicago and New York with like signs that can come off as like aggressive or anti-Semitic, and in their minds, right, people are like, those are the Hebrew Israelites. Why are you even platforming them? And then in my mind, I'm like, wait, it's this loving community in southern Israel who I've got nothing but good vibes from. So I want to help reconcile these two experiences people are having with members of your community. So maybe we just start by giving a little context. Who are the Hebrew Israelites? How you all came to be and how you arrived to made it over to Israel.
Israel. Well, I think I'll give the broader context first, so that people could be able to really understand it on the broader scale, and then I'll bring it down to the community itself. Because like in every other community or people group, we're not a monolith. So although we all are considered Hebrew Israelites, the various communities have different ideologies, carry themselves differently, subscribe to different things. We don't all subscribe to the same thing. But for people who are on the outside, they think and believe that we're all one monolith, because the only um the only connection that they have to this idea of Hebrew Israelites is from a negative perspective. And so as far as they're concerned, all they know is what they saw, and that's a greater representative in their minds of the entire Hebrew Israelite community and experience. But now, when you're looking at people who consider themselves Hebrew Israelites, these are people. The majority of them are people who are actually a part of that lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who going all the way back to 70 AD and even before, when we were exiled from Israel, and there were also people who had migrated from Israel to North Africa and to West Africa. They found themselves a safe haven in West Africa, because all throughout these time periods, there were people and great powers who would come into this region and who had overtook it. And so, you had the Mamluks, and you had the Crusades, and you had the Arabs, and you had the Ottomans, and you had the British. All throughout this period of time, people were migrating in and out. Now, those who consider themselves Hebrew Israelites today, they were the ones who had arrived to the western coast of Africa, and they were sold by the natives of West Africa into slavery to the Europeans. So those Europeans had taken them then into the Western Hemisphere. They took them into Europe to be slaves or internal workers, and then there were those who were taken to North America, to South America, to the Isles of the Caribbean, and all of these people had a unique identity because 30% of those people who were taken into the Western Hemisphere, who were sold into slavery, these people identified ethnically as Israelites, as people who are ethnically from Judea, from Israel, along with 199 other ethnic groups. And when you look at African people, you would also think that all of these people are one monolith. There's no such thing as, for example, Ghanaians. This was a name that was given to the region by Europeans, and they just carved it out and said, we're just going to call this entire, group of people Ghanaians. But within Ghana, you have more than 200 different ethnic groups, different tribes, subscribe to different things, have no connection whatsoever, and have a lot of internal fighting. So when we arrived to America, one thing that they did do was to disconnect us from our identity. And how did they do that? They did it in three ways. The first way was to change your name, right? Because your name has a very significant meaning, and it connects you once again to somewhere and to someone and to some, in Israelite culture, your name has a very significant meaning. And so they changed those names. The second thing they did was they forced us to become now Christians, right? They Christianized us. The majority of Israelites were not Christian. These were people who subscribed to the Torah, to the Bible, but not from the Christian perspective, but more so from the Israelite perspective, by being those people who trace our identity back to the Israelites. And the third thing that they did was to disconnect the families. So they would sell, a mother and a father to different places, and then sell the children to other people. And then in that way, you're able to disconnect that continuation of the lineage so that the people, the children and the children's children, will not be able to know who they are and what they are. And so about 400 years, we were totally disconnected from our identity. But a lot of people continue to hold on to that Israelite identity underlining, wherein you wouldn't know that they were Israelites because they were, they were forbidden to preach, to teach, to read, to practice, their traditions. So they would do it in different ways. One of the ways were through song. So they would sing songs of what they called of Zion. They were sing about Canaan's land. They were sing about Moses coming to, carry them home. They were sing about all these things that reconnected them back to this landmass. After the emancipation, there were big groups of those who identified as Israelites began to migrate from the southern states to the north. And then once they migrated to the north and they were now free, they were then able to express their identity outwardly. And so they started then connecting into small communities of people who also either held on to that identity or wanted to reconnect with that identity because they had lost it throughout the generations. So they formed these small communities. The community that we come from was a community that was formed in Chicago. And so in 1966, one of the young people within that community, his name was Ben-Israel, he had a vision that it was time to leave America and to go back to where we actually came from initially. Because he was saying that if things are not going to get any better for us here in America, why are we trying to force ourselves into this society? Because it was during that period of time when they were fighting for civil rights. And so he was saying, and the community was saying, look, they don't want to give us any civil rights. They don't want us to vote. They don't want us to, integrate into their society. Why are we forcing ourselves to do so? Let's just go back to where we came from and end it like that. And so they began to move out of America in 1967, and they arrived then into Israel in 1968. And in 1969, they began to form this community in Israel. It was called the Village of Peace. So it was a community that was built on principles of love, of familyhood, of justice, of community, of of equality, and all of these things were the foundation for these communities, for this community. And then we also adopted all of those traits that we had lost a long time ago. So we went back to eating vegan food. We went back to dressing in our African culture. We went back to celebrating the biblical holy days and not the Christian holy days. We went back to changing our names from those European names that were given to us to Hebraic names. We went back to all of these things so that we can once again identify ourselves with who we are as Israelites. And so our community today is not part of those communities on the outside. Yes, during the 1860s, there were people who had initially, created these small communities. Yeah, you did have those people who were the pioneers. But then you have from those pioneering groups, you have people who had started to break off, to separate groups. And so each one of these groups then changed, their ideology. So you had those who were who had accepted the fact that they wanted to practice some pagan holidays. You had those who still read from the New Testament. You have those who still eat meat. You have those who don't dress in African culture. You have those who don't believe that we should ever come back to Israel, or at least not now. You have those who are very antagonistic towards Arabs, who are antagonistic towards Jews. You have all of these communities. You have those who are antagonistic towards us. So all of these various communities don't really connect like that. The only thing that really connects us all is our identity. And so even when you look, for example, in the Jewish world, you have people who are far left, far right, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Orthodox, non. So all of these different groups, they don't really mesh together like that. But there is one thing that keep you together, and that's a common idea of who you are and your identity. And so that's what Hebrew Israelites are. So when you see people on the streets in America and in other places, they don't necessarily represent all Hebrew Israelites. They represent who they are. So you have their specific groups, and they represent them, right? But then you have us who represent us. And so if you don't have the chance to be able to speak to us, then you would think that everybody is a monolith. But in actuality, we aren't a monolith. So, that's just the long and short of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashriel. Maybe to sum it up in one line, at least through a lens that is, I think, relevant towards many people who have questions or concerns about the Hebrew Israelites, many of the ones in the diaspora are essentially saying, we are the real Jews and those white guys over there aren't. The ones, your community is saying, we are all the Israelites. Would that be a...
I mean, but the thing about that, Adar, and it's important, I really want to, touch on that, because that rift is not anything that we actually created. The rift came from the fact that a lot of those people who identify as Israelites had been for so long demeaned, and there was this idea that we had appropriated someone else's identity. And just suddenly woke up and said, well, we don't know who we are because we've lost touch with our actual culture and identity because we were enslaved. But we read into the books of the Bible and we saw where the Israelites in Egypt were enslaved, and so we identified with that enslavement because that's what we were experiencing. And so we just took that upon ourselves to say that those are who we are. We are the same people. But it didn't happen like that. And so people who don't understand how it happened, they would just look at it and say, yeah, that's how it happened. But no, these people actually held on to a lot of those traits, but they weren't able to outwardly express that for a long period of time because they would get hung from a tree or whipped to death or near death, or their children would get killed in front of them, or tied to horses and then have the horses run into two different directions and split the bodies. So there was a lot of trauma that came from you trying to identify with who you are because they really wanted to break us down. So,
but are these things that you're saying in general happen to slaves, or you're saying specifically for claiming to be an Israelite? This was
no. This happened to a lot of slaves, but a lot of those slaves. A lot of those slaves, according to the slave voyages, they identified as Israelites, as tribes of Israel who migrated from Israel or who, were forcibly removed from Israel during periods of time when you had these colonial powers who had come in and overthrew the monarchy. So in that case, um, when you tell us that you don't know who you are and you're appropriating our identity, that's very offensive. And so, evidently, if you say that for long enough, then you're going to get a reaction. And so, what you're seeing now from Hebrew Israelites, this hasn't always been the case. Because initially, Hebrew Israelites actually wanted to merge into the Jewish family. So you have those people who were actually in the 1880s who would consider themselves Ethiopian Jews, or they had other names for themselves, and they wanted to actually be part of the Jewish family, but they were rejected. They're rejected, and so it's like, okay, no problem. So we'll do our own thing, and you see that rejection still today because we're not really accepted by I'm not talking so much about the people. I'm talking more so about the institutions. The rabbinical institution don't accept us. They say that we are goyim, right? We have no connection at all to Israel. And so obviously you're going to get a reaction if you continue to disrespect somebody else's identity and disrespect somebody else's culture. And so that reaction is going to be on the other side of the pendulum. So you take it to one side, and instead of putting it in the middle, then people take it all the way to the other side. So what we're saying is that, look, we don't want to define for other people who and what they are. If you say that this is who you are, no problem. We will tell you who we are. We don't want you defining for us either who we are and determining our identity. So long as we can get along like that, that's cool. If you try and define for us who we are and then tell us that you're the ones who are held on to this identity, and so you're able to recognize who is and who isn't based on if we're in alignment with how you see these cultural tenets, and that's a big problem. And so what you're seeing today is just a reaction to that, unfortunately.
Interesting. Yeah, and you're saying in Israeli society, the institutions is one thing, but in Israeli society, is there, for the most part, acceptance of your community?
I mean, in Israeli society, I don't think they care too much about, the identity as an Israelite more than what they care about our contribution to Israel. Right.
Right,
And
right.
so it's like you can call yourself whatever you want to, but like you contribute in, to society. You're part and parcel of, the mosaic of Israel. You've been here for so long. You have 5 generations in Israel. I mean, whatever you are, you're part of us, And so that's how the Israeli society views us for the most part.
Right.
I mean, besides those people who are radicals.
Yeah.
But the institutions are terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, well, I'm big on focusing on systems and institutions and not people, because people are generally just products of those systems and institutions. So I think that's often the better place to focus the energy. Is there are you guys acting to try to get more acceptance from Israeli institutions?
We don't need acceptance from Israeli institutions. We initially we wanted, to be recognized, but when we realized that that's not going to happen with these institutions, we're not even focusing on that. We're focusing on who we are and what we are, and as a result of that, yeah, we've come up against a lot of challenges, right? A lot of hurdles: deportation out of Israel, not having access to
Okay.
some of the institutions in Israel, all of these things, because we refuse to conform to other people's idea of who and what we are and what we should be.
On a side note, real quick, before we get into more like Israel-Palestine stuff, which I want to touch on, you mentioned the veganism. And I found this one of the most fascinating parts of your community, because there's a lot of vegetarian communities in the world, but there's close to no vegan communities. It's almost unheard of. And what you all did was fascinating, because not only is it one of the only vegan communities, but you had all these recipes from
Mhm.
America. A lot of it was like these southern home foods, home cooking, and then you veganized it in a way that was just fascinating. So, Tama Chaim, the place in Tel
Yes.
Aviv, I love
Yes,
that place. The barbecue twists, the lasagna.
yes.
Like, damn, bro, like that stuff's so good. The pizza.
Yeah. You're
So
gonna
I
make
just
me get
found
up
that.
and go get some food right now, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I come visit, that's one of my requirements that we get a nice, let's call it a Dimona meal, or a
Good.
Hebrew Israelite meal. Um, so you mentioned extremists. Now, our country has gone extreme, where people in conflict become radical, become radicalized by the conflict. We've seen this happening over many decades, and October 7th certainly pushed it to whole new levels. From our conversations, you've always had a more balanced perspective on Israel-Palestine than the average Israeli does. Is this representative of how much of your community views things? Like, what's their sentiment on the state of things in terms of Israel-Palestine?
On a set of things today or just generally?
Well, even to just today, the bloodshed in Gaza, like that, like are they very much similar to the mainstream Israeli narrative we're hearing, where there's like close to zero interest or care if civilians are killed, that there's no vision for peace aside from first getting rid of Hamas and perhaps even emptying out Gaza entirely? Like these ideas have become very mainstream in Israeli society. The average Israeli, and again, I don't really blame people for holding these views because the conditions created these people, but the average Israeli does not give a shit how many children are killed in Gaza. And if Trump successfully ethnically cleanses Gaza, most Israelis would be happy about that. And I understand it. We all want our enemy to disappear. So if your enemy disappears, why would you be upset about it? Some people, though, are able to resist these impulses and these ideas. I'm wondering, are you seeing these ideas also be popularized in your community, or is there a clear difference in how the Hebrew Israelites are viewing the conflict relative to the average Israeli?
So I think I'll take it from two points, right? The first point is the fact that as human beings, right, and as people who built a community that is the foundation of it is peace, the village of peace. And we've done everything necessary to gather people from so many different backgrounds to come and to live in a society, in an environment where you don't have to lock the doors, where you don't experience, drive-by shootouts, where there's no gangs, where there's no exploitation of one another, where there's a family orientation, where people are looking out for one another. This is this is for us the microcosm of how we see that Israel could actually be. This is what we believe, and so when we see that there's every few years there's, and I don't even call it conflict, it's just bloodshed, um, for the purpose of what really? Because it's not like we're coming closer to a solution, right? And it's not just on the Israeli side, but it's also on the Palestinian side. Now we've worked so closely and still today with a lot of Palestinians, but mainly Afro-Palestinians, right, to be able to bring the children of Abraham back together once again, right, from Sarah and from Hagar, and for us to be able to see things from a purely humanitarian perspective as opposed to just political. Because once you speak about the politics of it, then everybody have these views and they have strong views, and most times they become radical, like you said, when things like October 7th and everything that had happened afterwards take place, then you radicalize people on both ends. But as far as we're concerned, there has to be a solution to this that doesn't include this bloodshed. And so, no, we don't view the slaughtering of people, and I don't care who you are, Palestinian, Israeli, black, white, Chinese, foreigner. We don't see that as anything that is favorable and could be of any assistance to anybody. There's a mother who's a Palestinian, there's a mother who's an Israeli. Do you think that those mothers have a different feeling in regards to their children dying or their loved ones being killed, and a conflict that is just ongoing and you really can't see no horizon? Absolutely not. And so what we say is that we have to bring a solution that is based on something other than what we've tried to do up until now. Everything that we've tried to do up until now, which was purely based on political persuasions and desires, hasn't worked. So it has to be something that takes into consideration the desires, the aspirations, the wants from people on both ends, and see where we could be able to actually meet in the middle to allow everybody to fully express themselves and to feel that security and to feel that dignity, and only then could it lead to peace. But if people on either side don't feel secure or don't feel like their dignity is being upheld, you would never lead to peace. That will never lead to peace. And it's not any better by having people who are radical leading the way, and chanting death to the Arabs, and on the other side, death to the Jews. That's not going to assist in no way, shape, or form. Our belief is that we base everything on the prophets of Israel, right? And so one thing that the prophets of Israel said in the Bible is that we would have to then shine a light, be a light. What is that light? That means to show a different way, to show a different path, to provide a different alternative to what we're experiencing up until this very moment, because seemingly something is not working. And so if we don't provide an alternative to what isn't working, it's just going to continue to perpetuate itself. So our idea is that as Abraham was the biggest of those who had welcomed guests, we have to find a way to be able to work together so that we can be able, and I believe this is the responsibility of our generation, because the generation beforehand, or the generations beforehand, they were radical in their thinking. They never saw a solution outside of two ideas: two-state solution, one-state solution, from the river to the sea, Israel being wiped out, Palestinians not being here. These have been the prevalent ideas up until now. But when you understand that Palestinians not going nowhere, neither are the people who are residing in Israel, and you would have to then think outside of the box in a way where it'll force you to have to come up with, new ideas, fresh ideas. But that'll have to come from new people with a different vision and a voice for peace, who actually desire to live in peace, as opposed to trying to coerce the other people to align themselves with how you view this plan out. So for us, it's just a tragedy, and there's no winners in war. uh, you know, Bottom line, the only
So
winners really in this, I think, will be the people who are actually, making the big money from the weapons being sold. Those people who are getting a lot of money into their pockets. The leaders who, unless they continue to perpetuate this idea of continual war, they won't be voted in again. So, they're all playing on the small people like us, who are at the end the real victims.
amen. Amen to that. So, while I know you can't speak for your community as a whole, right? Even your community, I imagine, is not a monolith, but what you just explained, you're saying is a general view in your community. It's generally
Yeah,
accepted, what you just said.
yeah,
Yeah, so that is fascinating. Like, that's something I need to better understand from a sociological perspective, how that happens, right? Because we're really to a point where when we feel like it's life or death, it's so hard to view things in what I would describe what you just said to be sensible. It's hard to see things sensibly. And there's certain communities within Israel that have an easier time to do it, but most of those are a bit more intuitive. Like, I understand why Arab Israelis slash Palestinian citizens of Israel, why it's easier for them to have empathy for their Palestinian brothers and sisters on the other side. But aside from them, it's not like you take the Druze community, who you would think that culturally and ethnically they might be closer to Palestinians. I don't, they generally don't. They vote right wing and they don't care all too much about human rights abuses. So I want to better understand how that comes to be on a community level, because I think there might lie some key to de-radicalization, or at the very least, what value a society needs to not allow it to get radicalized in the first place. So that's just me thinking out loud. I think there's something very significant about the fact that your community views things so differently, despite the fact that many of you guys serve in the army, right? You guys have a pretty high, what's the
100,
percentages? How many?
100%.
Okay, right, right. So that's just crazy. It's not like it's like some, yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna need to think about it. I'm coming to study you guys.
I mean, there've been a lot of people who came to study us, and for us, sociologically, I would say that building a community like ours, it was only possible coming out of the experiences that we had had for so long prior to that. It forced us to have to look at the world from a different perspective because we really looked to the left and looked to the right and realized that we were all that we had. And so we had to then establish something for us to allow us, even coming into Israel. Most people don't even know that we weren't necessarily accepted by the Israelis, right? Because as far as they were concerned, these were people who were infiltrators coming to Israel, claiming to be Israelites and want to return here, but in actuality, they are not part of us. But then also on the flip side of it, you had Palestinian leadership and people who had viewed us as people who are who are supportive of this idea that they call colonialism and the oppression of the Palestinians. And so the fact that we live in Israel, and I see a lot of comments about that, and a lot of people say it. We live in Israel, and the first thing that people say on the Palestinian side is that how many babies that you need to kill to be able to live on this stolen Palestinian land, and how could you claim to have established a village of peace on land that people were forcibly removed from? And so, in effect, you all are just as much a problem as those who we consider settler colonialists. And so for us, we're in a very unique position because we're not really wanted like that from the establishment on this end. And then we're also not really wanted from the establishment on that end. We serve 100% in the military because we believe in the importance of first of all, the protection of the land of Israel, not necessarily just to say, but the land of Israel. As Israelites, it's our responsibility to protect the land and all of the residents in it. So the residents could be asylum seekers from Sudan and Eritrea. It could be Palestinians. It could be Arab Israelis. It could be Jews. Whoever is residing here, it's our responsibility to protect that, not by being aggressive towards others, but to do what's necessary to be able to, within this geopolitical climate, to protect the land and to protect the people who are residing here inside of Israel. But on the flip side of it, also, we've established institutions like the Dr. Martin Luther King SCLC Ben Ami Institute for New Humanity, through which we provide non-conflict ways of we provide what's the name of it, yeah, ways, we alternative ways for dealing with conflict. And what Dr. Martin Luther King's 7 stages or 7 steps for the beloved community. And so we've adopted these ideas and we've made them part of our community, but we're also working with Palestinians, working with Israelis in order to be able to sit down at a table of brotherhood, understand the concerns from both ends, and then work together to be able to provide a solution. Each of us individually won't be able to bring a solution to the current state of affairs. But we have to work together to understand the concerns, to understand the hurt, to understand the trauma from both ends, and understand how that has affected us all the way and how it becomes worse from generation to generation because things are becoming more radical. And the more they become radical, the people are also radicalized. The more the people are radicalized, then there's no problem to go to conflict. Then the more conflict you have, the people become more radical. Then those people become more radical again. So you go back to conflict because they figured that this is the only way to be. So it's kind of an ongoing perpetual cycle of violence, of death, that if you don't find a solution that is a sustainable one, we're going to continue to experience it. And I can tell you right now, Adar, it's not going to happen with people claiming that Israel shouldn't exist and it should be wiped out. And it's not going to happen through trying to force Palestinians either out of Gaza or to forcibly, make them, align themselves with whatever our desires are. I don't necessarily, and I'm speaking for myself now, have a major problem with organizations like Hamas. And it's not only because what Hamas represents in my mind, but it's also because you have a lot of other organizations like that who are operating on the African continent and totally destabilizing the continent. So you have Al-Shabaab. Now, these people are not all Arabs, right? You have uh, Al-Shabaab. You have Boko Haram, who are Nigerians in Nigeria, but they're destabilizing Nigeria. You have Al-Qaeda Sahel, who are people of my skin hue, but are destabilizing the entire Sahel. You have Al-Nusra. All of these organizations that are doing some of the same things, using radical tactics for promoting whatever their purposes are. I have a major issue with that. But I also have a major issue on the flip side of it, with militaries, coercing and destabilizing countries as well, having so much collateral damage to so many innocent people who, I mean, what do they have to do with it? And so it's just a cycle of death and destruction, which I believe there is a solution to. But I believe that we would have to be the ones to bring a solution. It's not going to come from those people who continue to feed off of the conflict continuing as it is.
Thank you. Ashriel, do you have some more time
Yeah, let's talk.
for Q&A?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. We're gonna open it to Q&A. Either ask questions in chat or
I have a
unmute
question.
yourself and ask. Yeah, go ahead, Altoids.
So you said a lot of things, and I appreciate the lecture. Thank you. Now, in regards to many of the points you made, for instance, the first point is the whole history of African West African people and Israel and the connection that you claim to have. My family is from Northwest Africa, Morocco, specifically in Tunisia, and the Jews in Morocco and Tunisia do not look they don't look anything like people from sub-Saharan West Africa. And of course, we have the closest, if you will, connection to the people in West West Africa, which are the Maghrebi population, the Masig, and all those groups. Now, do you have any proof or evidence that can link to your claims that people in West Africa who were taken as slaves into America, into the Caribbean, etc., as being Jewish, one, and two, being taken into the Americas, and thirdly, that all this evidence can link to you and to your community being those same people, a specific people, descendant of this specific people.
Right.
If
Beautiful.
if so, yeah. No, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, beautiful question, my brother. Number one, the idea of who is an Israelite and what the identity is a very vast one, because there are no one people who look the same. From and you have people who look like sub-Saharan Africans, but you have those people who would be seemingly European. You have those people who are in North Africa, but you have also those people who are seemingly Chinese. So yeah, there have been a lot of also assimilation throughout the generations and intermarriages with these various peoples all throughout history, that it's not an uncommon thing for people to look the same, even though they are connected to a specific bloodline, and also hold on to a lot of those cultural traits. So it's not uncommon, and you could see you could view it even when you're looking at people who consider themselves also Jewish. You have those people who are coming from Ethiopia, right? Beta Israel community. You have those who are the Bnei Menashe, coming out of India. You have those you have those who are from the Kaifeng in China. You have those who consider themselves Ashkenazi coming out of Europe. You have those who, also were in West Africa. You have those who are in South Africa, called the Limba. And so, yeah, there's a vast um, um, trait of these people and how they look. But throughout the generations, as I say, they have they have really commingled with a lot of the people in the places that they had found refuge in. Now, when we talk about those people on the west coast of Africa, right, who had migrated, well, there are a lot of migration patterns that you could be able to look at anthropologically that could be able to actually show you these things. You have people who have really dedicated themselves to, to this study. People like, for example, Edith Bruder, people like Tudor Parfit. You also have a lot of those communities who
Tudor
still
Parker was
exist.
my professor back then.
Or was he what in Florida?
Yes, he was my professor last year actually.
Beautiful. So yeah, so you can check me on that then. I'm happy. You also have people like Oluda Equiano, who had written, about his identity when he was taken in as a slave at 11 years old, and he bought himself out of slavery at 15. You have people like uh, to Remy Ilona, who have really documented the migration pattern, migration routes of those who are considered Igbo today in Nigeria, and the fact that they had held on to a lot of those customs, those traditions up until this very point. Going all the way back to 721 BC, when the Assyrians actually took over Israel. You have those people who had written um, the what you call it? I'll remember it again. They've written down the migration patterns of these communities throughout the generations. You have also those people, when you look at the slave voyages, they'll give you a listing of people and their names who were actually taken into enslavement in America. They give you the names before they were enslaved, and they'll give you the new names that they had received upon the arrival to America. You have people like Mango Park, who had visited West Africa in the 1600s, and this was before some of those places had even had any communication with anybody from the outside world. They held on to a lot of scrolls in the Arabic language, and he realized that they were actually praying and using these scrolls that were connected to Israelites, and he really didn't even understand, and they didn't even know that there were other people outside of themselves who had continued to hold on to this identity. Then you have the DNA patterns. Now, the DNA patterns don't necessarily give you, or the DNA checks don't necessarily give you a connection to West Africa, because West African countries are countries that are made up. I mean, these things are artificial. You have so many, like I said, you have so many different ethnic groups. But when you look at specific ethnic groups in West Africa, like the Ga in Ghana, like the Ashanti in Ghana, like the Ewe, like the Sefwe, and you look in Nigeria, you look at the Igbo, and you look at the Yoruba, then you look at the Israelites in Benin. Then you look at those who consider themselves also part of those Israelite tribes in Senegal and in Gambia. They still actually exist until this very day. They're still there. So, and a lot of them could be able to tell you about their identity and who they are, and they've never changed it up. These things have been moving from generation to generation. And so, I mean, I can continue on with a lot of other evidence that could be able to show these things, but these things are well documented. Now, I think the reason why people don't really focus on these things is because there has not been, major focus. I mean, even looking in the Jewish Talmud, right? They talk about the fact that a lot of those people who had migrated from Israel, they went, to the other side of the river, the Sembation River, and they continued to practice their Jewish or their Israelite practices like that. So These things are well documented, but people haven't focused on that because it's always been, the African continent has always been good for exploitation, but it never was good to really be able to understand the identity of people, besides the fact that when you talk about the original people on the surface, or at the least, going back 2 million years, you have, archaeological findings that could be able to show you that, in the Fertile Crescent, northeastern Africa, the area of Ethiopia and Israel and Egypt, they could be able to show that these bones go back, a very long time. Also, Yusuf ben Yochanan, who was a very intelligent teacher. You have people like, man, I can just go on and on and on. I don't really want to bore you with all these names, but yeah, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of archaeology. There's a lot of people who are still alive to this very day who could be able to give you a very clear account of these things and how they connect to the people in America. But mainly, I would think that I would say that the one who actually makes the connection the best is Remy Ilona. So if you have a chance to be able to read some of his books, I think that would be able to give you a very good insight about that.
Okay, so now that you answered this question, because some of the stuff you said is true, that there's Jews who move to certain sections of West Africa, but these communities all disappear. They're all gone from history. They were gone due to many reasons: assimilation, war, as you said, slavery. But the real there's a 1 second position here, which, let's say, hypothetically speaking, yes, it's true that some groups may have migrated there, and the communities are gone to history as they moved there back in the day before the moving of Islam into the West, North, South Africa. Now, you have this case in which you said earlier that the Jewish establishment of Jewish institutions, as in the rabbinical institutions, they don't accept the newcomers or people like yourself or people from your community, the Hebrew Israelites, who claim to be Jewish or Israelites in this case, rather. Now, what do you think? Do you think that this is done purposely, or don't you see that it's done to everybody? You mentioned the Menashe from India. They were forced. They were not forced, but they were told to do a Giyur Lehumra, a conversion out of doubt. The Caliphate of China, they were all put into the Giyur Lehumra. They were put in conversions out of doubt. Many of the Ethiopians, specifically the Habasha people, and the Christians who were Christians in all these groups that were not really Jewish. Remember, in Ethiopia, there were two main groups of supposedly Jews: the people from the Gondar area. From Siamien, I think it's called Siamien. There were two groups: Habash and the people from Siamien. The people from Siamien was considered Jewish, 100%, and they were not put into any process of Giyur Lehumra according to the establishment, the positions of Rabbi Yosef. While the people from Havash and other groups were put into the Giyur Lehumra because the lack of any information that were Jewish, or rather, not just the lack of information. If you look at the Talmud and previous writings and the letters between rabbis, they clear that there's difference between the Havash and the Kush, etc. But they were also put into the Giyur Lehumra. If you see the Igbo today, even though there's a very meager genetic connection with Jews, with the general Jewish population, there's still very small. And to the Parfi speaks about the Igbo. There's a very small connection that ties them to Israel genetically to the rest of the Jews. But even them, they were told to do a Giyur Lehumra, and they accepted and assimilated to the wider Jewish community, the people in Nigeria. If I'm not mistaken, the Igbo is from Nigeria, correct?
From Nigeria.
In your case, I think most of the problem that people has is that you guys are not wanting to assimilate to the wider Jewish world. And like other people say, other groups of the Hebrew Israelites, not only they don't want to assimilate, they want to outright reject the establishment, the Jewishness of Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews, North African Jews, whatever they are, based on, I don't know, ideological reasons or, I don't know, fantastical reasons. I don't know what the reason is. They are denying the Jewishness of the Jews of these groups. But so in that case, based on all I'm doing now, because I don't want to lecture you either. So do you think, is there a way, a possibility in which your community, because I know some people in your community have done it, will do a yearly homework to be accepted and be assimilated to the wider Jewish community?
Okay, well, you said a mouthful there, Altiot. But let me try and break it down into particles for you so that you can be able to see it from a different perspective. I understand what the mainstream ideas are, and I understand the information that has been provided, but it's not necessarily true. A lot of it isn't true, and you wouldn't know that it isn't true until you go a bit deeper. And so I want to just go a bit deeper with you. A lot of these communities who you may refer to as Jewish, they don't consider themselves Jewish. See, the idea of being a Jew as it is recognized and accepted today, when you look at how it's been interpreted over the years and how all of these interpretations have come together, and then in what the 1400s, when the rabbi, what was his name, I forget his name, but he put all of these things together, and he actually came up with the Mishnah, and then the Mishnah was what actually precluded the Talmud. But all of the writings in these places, these were interpretations by these rabbis based on the understanding that they had after the destruction of the Second Temple, and so they took a lot upon themselves to redefine a lot of things. As per what they understand them to be, and then to take those redefinitions and to continue to build on them, as opposed to really just building on the foundation of the Torah itself. And so a lot of these communities today, like the Igbo, like the Beta Israel, they continue to hold on to a lot of those traditions from the first temple days. So they never really migrated over to the traditions that had developed after the destruction of the Second Temple after 70 A.D. and with the interpretations of the rabbis, along the generations. And so that's where a major problems come in at when you're defining things based on your understanding of what is a Jew based on the new interpretations, when in actuality people will continue to hold on to things as they were. And I'll give you two examples. The first example is that, as far as we're concerned, we maintain the lineage of a family through the father, through the seed. So you have Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all of these people who were actually males. But then in the interpretation of things, according to the Jewish religion today, the lineage is through the mother. So that's something that then clashes, because no, we cannot accept the fact that lineage now has changed and switched over from this to that. Secondly, we don't identify with the months of the year, as they're called, that were imported from Babylon, like Tishrei and Cheshvan and Kislev. All of those are Babylonian. We maintain the year cycle based on the Torah. So our new year won't be on the 1st of Tishrei. Our new year would be on the 1st of Aviv, in the spring, 2 weeks prior to Passover, as is written in the Bible. And so these two things then would clash. And so in that case, no, we cannot assimilate ourselves into the wider Jewish family as is known today, because number one, only 25% of people who are identified as Jews are actually Jewish Orthodox, because 75%, as a matter of fact, the Reform Jews are the largest sect today, and they don't follow those tenets as they are. But a lot of people
Reform Jews are not really following Judaism, so.
I mean, okay, but then that's where the problem. Then another question arises. Then how do you define a Jew? Who is a Jew? That this has been a question that has been, people have continue to contend with because there's no clear definition of it. We don't consider ourselves Jewish in accordance with the tenets of the rabbinical Judaism, but we are Jew from the tribe of Judah. So there will be people in the midst of us who are also of the tribe of Judah. So when we identify ourselves as Israelites, we're identifying ourselves as part of the collective family of 12 tribes who 10 of those tribes had dispersed. They hadn't been lost and they definitely didn't disappear, but simply people hadn't really put a lot of attention towards them. And so as far as we were concerned, these communities or these tribes were lost. But even in the in the Talmud and in all of the other Jewish writings, it's always said that at one point or another, we would like to gather all of the exiles from all four corners of the earth, bringing back all of the tribes of Israel, and we once again would be the nation of Israel or the Hebrew nation. But it says nothing about being Jewish. But the idea of a Jew and what we know it today, this was something that had developed through two ways. One, those people who had resided in Judea were considered Jewish, not from the ethnic background, but simply because of your national identity by being in Judea. Number two, those who had subscribed to the rabbinical traditions that had developed after the destruction of the Second Temple. Not everybody subscribed to those things in a lot of other places in the world. And so you can't now force everybody to have to now align themselves with, how the view, and it's mostly based on the Ashkenazic, interpretations. You can't force everybody to have to align themselves with these interpretations or these customs or these traditions when they have a lot of traditions that they maintain for thousands and thousands of years. But when you're the ones who have the power, then you have the ability to be able to do so. Now imagine this. Imagine if the first people who had returned to Israel, who remained here in Israel, right? Those people were the Ethiopian Beta Israel. And the Ethiopian Beta Israel have very specific traditions and customs they had held on to. Now imagine if we then or they said that everybody have to align themselves with the customs of Beta Israel as they held on to them for thousands of years. That would then create a problem for people who had practiced other traditions from the Torah or some from the Talmud, but that would cause a problem for those people because now they would have to give up a lot of those customs that they had held on so near and dear for thousands of years, and they could be able to go back generations and to prove this. Now they have to align themselves with the new idea. So I would say then that the main issue is that we don't align ourselves with the customs and traditions as they are in the halakha. We continue to hold on to the traditions as they were in the first temple days that you could be able to read in the Bible. Now, there's no longer, a temple and all of those things. And I can understand people saying, okay, well, we need to adjust, a lot of these customs to the day and the time that we're living in now because a lot of what we had then don't exist anymore. Yeah, but you can't take it so far off that now it actually clashes with some of the things that are written in the Bible. And when you look at the rabbinical writings, they say that whenever there's a clash between these two things, the rabbinical interpretations are the ones that take precedence. That's a major issue
That's
for
not
us.
true. Where does they say that?
It says it
There's
in
two
the
systems.
in
It
the
says the
Talmud.
Veraita. No, it says the Veraita and the Rabbanan. If you had to clash any of the two, the Torah comes first.
No. It's written in. I'll get you the exact scripture in the Talmud, and Adar, you could be able to get it over to him. That says specifically that the interpretations of the rabbis are the interpretations that take precedence, not the Torah. The Oraita and all of the, yeah, you have the ones who are more strict, and you have those who are less strict, right, in regards to a lot of these practices. But still, it's written right there in Torah. Now, whether people actually subscribe to that or not, that's a different story. But I know that if that's the foundation of it, then most likely that is what people subscribe to. So, I mean, it exists. It's there and I'll tell you how I know it's there because I read it. I just don't remember exactly where it is, but I could be able to pull it up. I mean, in the age of social media and iPhones, you could just pull it up quickly. And I'll try that in the meantime. I'll try and bring it up in the meantime while we're speaking.
Yeah, if you could pull it up real quickly. If not, all good. We could share it after the fact.
I would like to
Okay.
see it because if it's a debate or a discussion in which a rabbi was giving his opinion, I need to understand the full context to see whether or not this is law according to halakha.
I don't know if it's law. I know a lot of things are customary, So some things, some customs may not be enforced as law, but the fact that they exist, I mean, even they were in the conversation, I don't know if they have been totally accepted. But I know obviously that these things were in the conversations between the rabbis themselves. So yeah.
I had a quick question for you as well, if you could hear me.
Was that
Yeah,
Al?
I'll go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
It seems like there's really no it seems like there shouldn't really be any beef between us. I know you're and when I say us, I mean the community in New York. That's where I'm originally from. So let's use them as an example. And they're pretty hostile. But there shouldn't really be any beef because you already said that you're not like part of mainstream Judaism, correct? You're the
Right.
Israelites.
Right.
So there shouldn't be any beef with us because we're not claiming to be Israelites. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not claiming to be an Israelite. I'm just Jewish. So there shouldn't be any beef. I look at you guys maybe just like the Druze, like your own separate, unique community. So I don't understand why you would even care what Judaism thinks about you guys. You know what I mean?
I agree 100%, but it's not. I don't think it's so much of people caring what Judaism think about us more than what it is of trying to deny our identity. Because you may not, be in that sect with the denials, but there are a lot of people who actually have no problem with rejecting our identity. And so when you reject our identity and then you say, okay, this is, the only identity that exists. And so everything that you all are talking about, like I said, this is nothing that just happened, over the last few years, right? This goes back a few good generations. And initially there was no beef. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, we're happy to be able to join on to our family. But when the family who we considered our family rejected us, and then not only rejected us, started to say that we woke up with this idea of us being part of the house of Israel because we identified with what was written in the Bible in regards to enslavement of people, and because we were in that state at that moment in time, we just took that upon ourselves and said we then are going to appropriate this identity because we could connect to it. That's crazy for somebody to really think that that's the reality of who Israelites are or who Hebrews are. But we weren't the ones who had, who tried to identify for other people who they are and who they aren't. It was other people trying to to determine for us who we are, and who we aren't. And so at one point or another, that then brought it to a clash. And so once it brought it to a clash, what you see today is the result of tens of years, right? Of decades of rejection, of disrespect, of redefinition for other people, of a condescending, attitude towards people of Israelite tradition. And so these people are just reacting. Now, is it okay? Or if it's not okay, that's another conversation. But this is a reaction to that because, like I said initially, you had those who were from what was called the the communities that were under Rabbi Matthews and Rabbi Ford in New York. They actually wanted to. I mean, they saw themselves. They took on a lot of Jewish customs and everything, and they were ready to join the board of rabbis and everything. But it was the Ashkenazi establishment who was viewing them in a very negative light, like you all have nothing at all to do with us. And even if you ask today a rabbi, not if we are part of the house of Israel. Oh, sorry, if we're Jewish. if you ask, are we a part of the house of Israel? They would tell you, no, these people are absolute goyim. That's offensive to somebody who knows who they are. But you know, the people who are in power, they have that right to determine, because you know the wider Jewish community have given them that power to do so. Now, you know, obviously today more people are moving further and further away from that. But it was a time when the rabbi said so, and since the rabbi says so, we don't even have to, you know, go and do our own check. We're just going to go with what the rabbi says, and the rabbi said it, so it has to be true. But today you have, you know, you have a blessing to be able to actually go and to confirm and to validate everything that the rabbi and anybody else is saying in regards to whatever, and you could be able to arrive at the truth on your own. So it shouldn't be any beef. You're absolutely correct. It shouldn't be any beef. Why? Because we're not determining for you who you are. You shouldn't determine for us who we are. All we have to do is just find the commonalities and to be able to work together as part of the house of Israel. But there was beef after Solomon's united nation was destroyed. Jeroboam took one side, Jeroboam took another, divided into the nation of Israel, the nation or the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Israel. They both took, you know, different directions, and from there, I mean, the split just continued. So today we should be trying to see how we could be able to bring everybody together once again. And it doesn't have to be in accordance with how we view things. It has to be in accordance with what the Torah says. And the Torah doesn't necessarily speak about a bloodline. It speaks more about what you do. There are specific things that you should do that will then consider you or cause you to be part of the house of Israel. Just because you were born to a mother or to a father who were part of the house of Israel, but you're not subscribing to any of those commandments, any of those rules, those regulations, and you're just as good as any other random person.
If one thing I feel that did bring you guys together and that did get you acceptance is the fact that they were able to recruit you guys into the army. When you say that the army to protect Palestine, that's laughable. The same genocidal army that's killed almost 100,000 of us this last 18 months. You've basically aligned yourself with a colonial movement. You've basically gotten acceptance from them because they can use you for their army. And to sit here and say that you're basing your claim to this land because of some fairy tale history of you linking, and the fact that you may be linked to those ancient tribes that you may exist or may not exist, is laughable to me. A Palestinian, okay? I will gladly go to Hebron and take DNA from the grave of Abraham. And if your DNA is based closer to him 2% than mine, then I will relinquish my rights to my land. You know, you cannot sit here and join a colonial settler movement and that rides on the oppression of Palestinians and the displacement of the Palestinians and sit here and talk morality. You guys have aligned with a force that is racist, that the same racist element that you escaped from Chicago or wherever you guys came from. And you guys came here and you basically embraced it, and you've basically added it to your element. So I don't find anything that you say moral, and I think that you just basically took the blanket of this crazy nonsense to fix your fake history.
Well, see, the issue with that is that there are things that could be able to corroborate everything that I'm saying. And the fact that you view it,
but you linking to that ancient people, it doesn't make sense.
Justin, let's let him respond.
So you have to also be willing to listen. The fact that I'm sharing, you know, historical facts about something that could be corroborated, and you don't agree with it, I don't think that you have to be disrespectful, you know, in your disagreement. Now, the fact that we are serving in the military, it has nothing to do with, you know, our identity, because there are a lot of people who serve in the military just beside us who are Arab, Muslim, and a lot of other things. So, I mean, you can't call everybody then, you know, part of a colonial power or whatever, because then that conversation could be able to start.
On the slavery plantation, there were blacks who participated in whipping black people. Okay, if they had a slave whip another slave, it doesn't make him dead. So so basically, you're a house nigger, basically.
You have to let me
Justin,
finish.
Justin.
So the conversation then, I mean, because there are a lot of people who could say also today that Palestinian identity is a made-up identity, right? That there is nothing to be able to actually confirm Palestinian identity besides what developed over a few years since 1964. There is a lot of, there's other information that could be able to also corroborate the fact that prior to the first, I would say the Arabs in 635 BC AD, and then the Mamluks, and then the Ottoman Empire.
What can I do?
Prior to that, and prior to those
What can
periods
I
of
do?
time,
No, oh, I smelled
Hold
shit
on.
earlier. I thought it was the bad
Hold on.
shit.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Prior to
Yeah,
those
move it.
periods of time, these were periods of time where there was a methodical displacement of a lot of the indigenous people who were here. And over the years, the place became more Arabized. And then after it became more Arabized, then later on, the Palestinian identity then took shape. There are a lot of people who also, have these views as well, right? And so, you could sit here and you could say whatever it is that you want to say, but a lot of these things are also, able to be confirmed. So you can't dismiss, and this is what I'm saying, not only from one side but also from the other side. That there are people who try and dismiss the other people's identity because, or their history, because it really doesn't align with how you feel and how you see things. Now there are a lot of even throughout the generations, right, on the African continent, you have the Arab slave trade that had been the longest going slave trade up until this very day. All throughout the continent, you have a lot of these radical organizations that are actually Arab organizations that are destabilizing a lot of the African countries. You have also information that shows that prior to 1964, that a lot of these organizations and people who were leaders in the Arab communities here in Israel, they didn't want to even be identified as Palestinian because they said that was something that had come from the Zionists, and so they didn't want to be connected to that. They said that they were actually connected with, and they wanted to remain connected with Syria. But there are a lot of these things that exist. I'm not going into that because I'm not trying to create a an unnecessarily uncomfortable environment, right? But if that's what you want to bring up, we can discuss that as well. I don't
Yeah,
have
we
any
can
problem with
bring
discussing
it up, and we can let us bring us also science, DNA. Let us bring up architecture. Let us bring up that I have a grandfather's home
Maybe.
who was built in the 1600s. Okay, I don't have to pick some. If you want to do it, let's do it. DNA test. Let's do it. Let's look at.
I
We have
think.
science to answer these
Though,
questions.
guys,
And
real
if you want
quick.
to know about Palestinian identity and Arab identity, are all Africans the same? Whether they're from Senegal or from Ethiopia, are they all the same? So when you want to talk
No,
about
sir.
Arab slavery,
No,
did
sir.
Arabs participate in slavery any more than other your fellow Africans?
Yes, they did.
Did they do it? Okay,
Yes.
so the Arab slavery. Now, can you say that the Arabs of Palestine were participating in that slavery? No. So what Arabs did in one part of the Arab world, and what they did in another part is irrelevant. That'd be like me blaming one part of Africans for what people did in Southern Africa.
If
Okay,
I'm
so
not blaming that. I'm not blaming that
so
on.
yeah,
on
and
Israel.
my
real quick,
Palestinian
guys,
identity is 100,000 times more based in reality than your reality of your
Justin,
based on your ancestors.
Justin, real quick, because there's two conversations happening. The one of identity is one conversation, and I kind of want to move past
Yeah,
that because that's
but the thing is,
hold on,
what I'm saying is,
real quick, because him and Altoids were having a back and forth about identity.
but
Yeah,
bringing it relevant to bringing it relevant to today, he can identify to whatever he wants. That's his business. But the fact is that his identity and this whole performance that they do in Demona for tourists and stuff like that, they can identify to what they want. But the thing is that what's relevant to it now and what relevant to me is that these people are coming and hijacking the Israeli military, the Israeli identity that has basically displaced Palestinians. And I just find it appalling that
yeah.
these people can come and find home in my homeland where I'm not free. Okay, I find that just hypocrisy.
Yeah. Justin, I hear that. So I think we could actually have that conversation without trying to delegitimize identity. I think that it's probably not a helpful place to bring the conversation. The same way how Jews and Palestinians argue of who's more indigenous, who's more connected to the land. I think generally that doesn't lead places. I think what's more interesting is understanding the psychology behind joining the military and how it's perceived by those doing it, right? Because the way a Palestinian will experience the IDF is, an oppressive force. There's no other way to look at that. In fact, it's similar, like if I'm to use an extreme example, one that I can connect with, the villains, how evil we view the Nazis, I'm sure Palestinians view the IDF similarly. And even if we want to have a debate over
these people will put a priority on African migrants that are escaping persecutions from, say, South Sudan over the Palestinians that they are responsible for displacing. And I find it appalling that these people will say, let's focus on African migrants crossing from the Sinai and give them shelter. What about the 5 million Palestinians that are still refugees till this day?
No, okay.
Let's give them priority.
Fair. So fair.
But it's because it's based on race. It's based on race. It's not based on what's right. They will give preference to black refugees before Palestinian refugees. And this is because they've basically taken the racism of the white oppressor and basically redone it and basically deflected it.
So I'll get into that in a moment. But just on that point, Palestinians undoubtedly and for good reason view the IDF as an evil entity that has caused them tremendous harm. Here in Israeli society, we view it as an essential protector, one we cannot live without. The reality is, both are in fact true. If we were to take away all the oppression of the IDF, aside from just maintaining a secure border, we would still need the IDF to maintain a secure border until we get to a day where there's a peaceful resolution and the institution could evolve into something vastly different. But the way many Israelis look at it is, even if you could recognize the excesses and the human rights abuses, you can still recognize it to be essential. And I guess this is a question for you, Justin, and then, I'm happy for Ashriel to talk more about what you said about the African migrants. But if there's already going to be the IDF existing, wouldn't it be better if there's more participation from people who actually see the humanity of the Palestinians rather than it just being a bunch of extremists that couldn't give a shit? Like, I feel like I'd be more comfortable. Obviously I wouldn't want to see IDF presence if I was a Palestinian, but if I didn't need to interact with them, I would want them to at least be a humanist and see me as a human. Wouldn't you agree with that? Or would you rather they just not participate at all?
I'd rather they not participate because the IDF has proved that it is incapable. It is incapable to rule over the Palestinians. Look what they're doing to the settlers, what they're doing to us. Look at the 14-year-old American citizen who was killed in Tormasaya just a week ago. We don't know if it was a settler or a soldier who killed him. And at this point, it doesn't even make a difference. We're not going to sit here and make a pig kosher. And even if there's Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims who are participating in the army, that's irrelevant to me. In fact, it's the same. So if this guy is going to tell me that the army is here to protect, and sure, you do need an Israeli army maybe to protect yourself. But right now, the Israeli army is not protecting you. They are killing us. They are slaughtering. They are going on the offensive. What they're doing in Syria, what they're doing in Lebanon, what they're doing in Gaza is not protecting you. What they're doing to the West Bank by protecting these settlers, these illegal people that come from other countries and settle on our land and burn our houses and our cars and basically make safe havens for people like these people here to go and live. These people are basically, this is not helping us.
So just one last point, and then I'll give it to you, Ashriel. I would actually agree that I don't think they're Hebrew Israelites that serve in the IDF are helping you per se. I would agree with that. When I look at it from their perspective, as a group that has already had trouble being accepted into society, one of the clearest ways they could get that acceptance is through the IDF. And I know that's not going to be compelling to a Palestinian, but if they're already joining and the IDF already exists in an institution, and it's to some small extent just changing the dynamic a little bit, where you have just a few more soldiers that actually don't think it's as simple as Israel good, Palestine bad, but understand that all life matters. I feel like it makes it much easier to, on one hand, understand why they're doing it and accept the fact that they're doing it, because it's not like they're joining the IDF and leading in human rights abuses and they're an outlier in terms of their aggression. In fact, it seems like they're probably the opposite.
The agreement for them to join the IDF was made because they were facing deportation for the way they illegally came to the country. And that was the compromise that Israelis made. They said, let your kids serve in the army and we'll excuse the way that you illegally came here as visitors, tourists, and overextended your stay. That's what happened. So they did it. They basically sacrificed their children to join a genocidal army so that they can stay on the land illegally.
Okay. So that's why it's always important to, to speak facts. I mean, I can understand, Justin, your emotions. And I'm listening to him, and you're not the first Palestinian that I know. I mean, I have a lot of Palestinian people that I interact with quite often, and we're working on a lot of things together. For a better future for us all here. They don't have the same approach that you have. They have a very different approach, but I mean, everybody in how they view the situation. But I can say that first of all, we didn't join the IDF to get any acceptance, and we didn't come to Israel illegally. Number one, we joined the IDF in 2004 because part of the responsibility for everybody who reside in Israel, besides two communities, that's the Haredi community or the ultra Orthodox community, and the Arab community. Everybody is law to serve in the IDF. So it wasn't necessarily that we had to or that we asked, we wanted to serve in the IDF, but it's part of the Israeli law. And so because there are specific Israeli laws, then obviously we all have to fall under those laws. Adar, did you serve in the IDF, by the way? Okay, so Adar did as well, and Adar is doing great work in bringing Palestinians and Israelis together as well. And I don't think, Justin, that you and anybody else would consider, Adar a genocidal person who's, I don't know, joining the idea for the purpose of trying to, kill anybody or whatever. But he did it because it was
in the army right now, what it's doing in Gaza. Would you join them right now and participate in what they're doing in Gaza, or would you consciously object and not join?
No, I would definitely object. It's not for no reason they didn't release me. They released me for the reserves, likely on ideological grounds. But Ashriel, to that, like Justin, after we've known each other now for years, has accepted the fact that I was in the IDF because of where I am today. There are others who it's still a deal breaker because I served in the past. But yeah, it's. So I think we're finding some common ground. So Justin, is the difference now because
I want to finish this point though.
Yeah.
I want to finish this point. So obviously there are requirements for everybody who reside here in Israel. Now, we do have a major issue with Israeli policy in a lot of areas, right? But you can't then blame everybody for Israeli policy. I mean, because that's just as good as saying everybody who resided in Israel is part of the war or agree with all of Netanyahu's decisions, which is not true, because obviously you see people out protesting against that every day. But a common thing that I see is that this broad brush painting of everybody who reside in Israel or who is part of the IDF or any other institution as a villain and as somebody who is very much problematic, which I definitely disagree with, because I disagree with a lot of the policies, but I'm not in control, I'm not in charge, and obviously even though we're part of the IDF, we're not on the front line, we're not fighting either. But like I said, my leader, the reason why we joined and the reason why we also are part of a lot of the other institutions inside of Israel is simply because we're an intricate part of everything of Israel itself. And so as a result of that, yes, we're going to be in the IDF and other places, and hopefully at one point or another we won't need the IDF, and the IDF won't be a force as it is right now that people feel like is oppressing them. And obviously we don't agree with what's taking place in Gaza either, and we definitely don't agree with what took place here in Israel on October 7th and prior. It's been a lot of back and forth, and like I said initially, that's a big issue for us, looking at how people are dying on both sides. I mean, I can understand people being very emotional about what's taking place on one end, but a lot of these things are taking place on both ends. I mean, I personally know people, friends of mine, who, I mean, peace activists like Adar, but their parents were slaughtered. I have somebody from my community who was just singing, and a Hamas member came in and shot up the bat mitzvah and killed him, and that was something that we experienced also in our
Yeah,
community. So
he was actually the first. He was actually the first born black Hebrew in. So I know my history. So he was actually the
no, I'm
first
not saying
born
I'm
black
not saying that you
Hebrew
don't know. I'm
was
not saying that
killed
you
in a
don't know.
Hamas attack. But again,
That's
but what
right.
I'm trying to say is again, and I'm also aware that when I say you guys are there illegal, you guys came as tourist visas on tourist visas with your U.S. passports, and you overstayed. So therefore, you guys are illegal.
So let me
And
correct
even
you
there's
on that.
cases right
Let me
now.
correct
There's
you on that,
cases right
Justin.
now. Just real
Let me
quick, there's
correct you.
cases right now that where
Okay.
people still face deportation because they're still there under expired. And just what I'm finding that I cannot reconcile is the fact that like I have members of my family from Jerusalem who've lost their residency rights, unable to stay. Meanwhile, I'm looking at these people who came from Chicago who have settled and are basically welcomed because they made the choice to let their kids serve in the army, basically become mercenaries. That's
Okay.
just I just can't reconcile that. There's no making peace with people like that.
I got you. So number one, the people who had come to Israel in 1968, they actually came under the law of return, and they were actually given, Israeli passports, and they were sent to one of the kibbutzim to actually settle there. And so, what you're saying is not necessarily true about people coming with passports. That was something, that was propaganda that had started in the 1970s, because when they had started deporting people from Israel, because they said that we were worse than the PLO, and they said that we were working alongside the Palestinians to overthrow Israel. And so as a result of that, they said that we were kind of a fifth column inside of Israel, and they had to start to concoct all of these, false statements and claims in regards to our identity, in regards to our settlement here in Israel, and in regards to, our citizenship here. So they revoked everybody's residency status who had it initially. And so as a result of that, we then only had our passports that we still held on to. And so what we did also, in order to prevent them, because they had started this deportation campaign, what we did was a lot of those people gave up their passports from the states, and they said that we're now stateless, so they don't have the ability to be able to deport us. So it's a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of history, a lot of information that is fabricated information. But if you go and you read that and you rely only on that type of information, then you would never be able to know actually the real truth about these things. Secondly, in regards to us residing here in Israel, our residency here in Israel, and I mean, there's some people who view it one way, there's some people who view it another way. We are Israelites. We are part of, the house of Israel. Israel is our ancestral home. In the same way that you have, you say you're Palestinian, and I know other Palestinians who reside in other places, in the world. I have very strong ties with a brother in Chicago, as a matter of fact, from the Nashashibi family, who we work very closely in order to be able to kind of find some solutions for our people here. But what when you say that there are people who are still refugees after 3, 4, 5 generations living in other places in the world, born there, raised there, their families were born there, their families were raised there, they married there, and you're looking down 70 years later, and probably later on it'll be 100 years. You can't then say that these people, because they were born in a specific place and they were there for generations, now they no longer have ties to where they actually came from. And then it's just a fantastical idea of them saying 100 years later that we are from a place that we weren't born in. Most of us never visited, and we're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations out. But we still have, a connection to that place. We're still able to identify with that place. But somebody else, because they experienced, diaspora in another place in the world, now we're just going to say that they are Americans, or they are Africans, or they are whatever we would like to define them as, and say that they have no right to be able to go home to Israel. We're not saying that. We actually believe that there shouldn't be any roadblocks. We actually believe that Palestinians should be able to, to return a home. But obviously, there is mean, there's a border. There's a recognized state. This is a country. I mean, there are rules, there are regulations. Things just don't happen the way people would like for them to happen. And so, as a result of that, again, I don't determine policy, but I know enough to be able to understand, that in situations like those, I don't see how it'll happen where 5 million people would I don't know go. I mean, because it's not so much of let's live together more than what it is that everybody who's there is part of the problem and they should be removed. They should, just like you said, I mean, you don't understand why. I mean, you said the IDF opened up the way to be able to allow people like us to be able to come to settle on Palestinian land, which is absolutely untrue. Um, 1 second, let me get this. Uh-oh. Okay. It's not necessarily
we're about to wrap it up anyway, so you'll
okay. Okay, so it's not necessarily, that's not necessarily true, and we don't view it that way. I can understand your sentiment, and your sentiment, is one that you have all rights to. But at the same time, you can't, and nobody else can, determine for other people who they are. And this is what I was saying. It's part of the problem on both ends. You determining for us who we are, what we are, what we are part of, what we aren't. We don't have any ties to this land. It's fantastical. I mean, those type of things don't really lead to, a good place because we're not going anywhere. And most likely the people who are residing here and on the other side either are not going anywhere. We have to find a solution to be able to allow us to be able to all live in peace and security. But if that's not the idea, if the idea is to displace everybody who reside here and say that you're making up for wrongs that were done 70 years ago, and so that's not going to lead to anywhere. So I'm willing, and I'll be more than happy to even actually have more conversation with you, Justin, like I have with a lot of other people, to be able to actually show you and introduce you to parts of our reality that you're not familiar with. Because everything that you're sharing with me, I can give you all the articles that you read. I mean, because these are just you're regurgitating things that I already know the articles. I know who these people who these people are who wrote the articles. I know when they wrote the articles, and I know the context of these articles because that's one of that's my job as a spokesperson for the community to actually be up on a lot of these things. So I'm very familiar with it. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know a lot of Palestinian people who are actually on the on the PFLP and other places and other organizations, like Brother Ali up in Jerusalem, Ali Jeddah, and other people in Bethlehem, and we have brothers and sisters up in Jericho and in Tulkarem who I visit these places and I actually talk to these people. I'm very much involved, so I know and they know. You don't know because you're relying on something that you read in articles, but I'm here to have a conversation with you, and we could be able to. We don't even have to agree on everything because I don't agree with everything. I don't agree on everything with my brother, with my blood sister, with my mother, with my wife. So that's cool. We don't have to agree on everything, but I think that we can be able to understand each other's viewpoints. You understand why I do what I do. You understand why you feel the way you feel. Then we can find some common ground to be able to actually work things out for a better cause. Outside of that, just being emotional about it, I don't see where that's going to lead. Because I actually work with people on the grounds, and I know that there's a better way than to to go off on somebody like that. But
But it's not.
again,
But for you, you seem to focus on it's an issue of identity. For me, it's not an issue of identity. It's a legality. Jewish people can claim that they're descendants of this. You can claim that you're descendant, but legally, nowhere else in the world do people have a right to come and, based on their 2,000-year-old history, come and displace another people. Now, pragmatically, I can say, hey, we're all here. We got to do something. Let these people live in Dimona. Let these Jews live here. We can all live here as long as we're all equal. I don't have a problem with that on a pragmatic level. But to sit here and re-identify in history and go back and say that this is the reason, if you're basing your right to your existence on my land because of 2,000, 3,000 year history, you're not going to win me over. You can say, hey, I'm here. I want to live here. I want to contribute to the civilization here. And I would say, you know what? I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to sit here and accept some fantasy history of 2,000 years ago, because otherwise we're going to set precedents for people to go back and reclaim lands where their ancestors lived. Why grant this to Jewish people? Jewish people are not the only people who have history of where they were 3,000 years ago. So from a
Look, I'm not
pragmatic
sure.
level, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem living with people. But when you come to me with this thing and then at the same time participate in that force, you know, if you want me to have respect for you, then you guys should refuse. Just like the civil rights movement did, you guys should be doing the same for all people, not just for people based on the color of their skin.
We should do. I didn't understand that
You should
last.
you should not participate in that army. You
We
guys
should not
should
participate. In that.
yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah. Being
I mean,
being a part of the army today is an act of genocide. It is wrong. And until Israelis stand up and stand against their government and what it's doing, like brave people are doing every day, okay? Just like the people of Gaza who are standing up against Hamas right now. 14 Palestinians were killed in 1 week because they protested against Hamas. These are people who are standing up against their government because their government is doing something wrong. There are people every day in the Palestinian Authority who are being arrested because they stand up against when the Palestinian Authority does something wrong. So there's a right side and there's a bad side. And if you are saying it's our national duty, we have to do it, then you're basically saying I'm buying into this nonsense.
No, I mean, you don't have to tell me what I'm basically saying or not saying. I say exactly what I say, and I'm very clear with it. As a matter of fact, and I understand you. You know, I understand again. I understand your position. But your position doesn't have to be mine, and mine doesn't have to be yours. But we could be able to sit down and have a conversation about these things to be able to understand. And I'm not trying to win you over because I don't think that this is a game. I think this is very serious. This is the lives of people. And you can't just take one position and that position be the one that you believe is the only position. Because, yeah, there are people who are standing up to Hamas in Gaza, but then there are also people who are claiming that Hamas is a liberation movement that is fighting for, you know, and against oppression. You have also people in Israel who are standing up against the government and demand the end of this war and have been demanding the end of this war. And like I said, I even have friends who, family members, were working very closely with Palestinians in Gaza for a very long period of time in Kibbutz Be'eri, you know, for peaceful solutions, marching with him and everything. And you know, his mother and his father were both slaughtered, came into their house. You know, his father was even dysfunctional and was killed. So I mean,
I
there
know
are a
him.
lot of
I know him,
who
trust me.
your
His
Tom.
name Yotam, I've met him before. Him and he has a Palestinian guy that he goes around with as well. I've met them.
That's right. That's right. So I'm telling you these things not from an emotional point. I live this.
But again,
I experience these things.
again, these people do not take the position that you're taking as far as it's our national duty to go ahead and just join this army. But they don't take that position. I've spoken to him
Everybody,
twice.
yeah, but everybody take a position, you know, based on their position. I'm representing the position of my community, and it's not necessarily a position that may be a favorable one to you, but it's a position nonetheless. And so I can understand you not being, or anybody else not being in favor of the position, because I mean there are a lot of positions that I'm not in favor of, from other sides, from other people. But I can determine for them, and you know, how they should be able to take their position based on, you know, my own experience or based on my own understanding of how things should be. You know, that's not realistic, especially not in the world that we live in today. And so yes, we are serving, and we're going to do what's necessary to protect this land, but not on the backs of other people, right? We're working also for solutions together to be able to live, you know, in peace and in harmony. Now we're not on the front line killing people and all that, and then we're not even for that. But yes, we are part of these institutions, and we don't view that favorably. That when you leave out of Israel and you show an Israeli passport, that people are looking at you and saying you are just as much part of what's taking place in Gaza, and then they call you a baby killer and all these other, you know, terms that are absolutely despicable when all you did was provided a passport that says Israel on it. That means that everything that your country does, you're responsible for it, even if you are in opposition to the government, even if you have nothing to do with it, you're not even involved, even if you're a conscientious objector, you still have an Israeli passport. And so wherever you go, people are still looking at you as part and parcel of whatever is taking place. So, you know, in a case like that,
Right.
you can't blame everybody for something that you disagree with. I mean, that just doesn't work that way, because that means that what every Russian now that shows a Russian passport wherever they go in the world, they're going to be blamed for what's taking place in Ukraine, or every American that had an American passport. I don't know if you're in America or not. Justin, do you have an American passport?
I do.
Okay, so I don't think that it'll be
If
fair
I
that
go,
somebody.
if I join the army, in an illegal
No, one
war, then
second.
yes, I'm to blame.
This is my point. This is my point. That I don't think it'll be fair that if you
Okay,
provided
but
your
nobody's saying that. We're not blaming Israelis. Listen, buddy, I talk to Israelis every day. I don't have a problem with Israelis. I don't have a problem with Jews. But if you're participating and sitting here telling me about how it is necessary or a legal national responsibility to participate in a
that
genocide army, I'm sorry,
point.
you lose me, buddy.
Okay,
And
so
you're
that's
saying that,
not
well,
your
this is my belief.
So
I don't
and
care.
I understand that. Justin, I understand that. That's your belief. And you're entitled to your belief. But you cannot coerce somebody else into believing and seeing and experiencing things that because I don't see things as you see them. We could be able to sit down and have a conversation about these things, but I don't. And you're not going to force me. I'm intelligent enough that you won't force me into having to align myself with your belief and your thought pattern. But it's fine. It's okay for us to be able to discuss it. Your issue wasn't the IDF. Your issue initially was the fact that we're Israelites and we're saying that we have claim to land and we're returning. So you're saying that's fantastical and we're returning based on that idea and all of those things.
Fantasy.
Well, you can't. Say again?
Fantasy, not fantastical. Fantasy. It was a fantasy.
Okay. So you're saying that's a fantasy. Look,
Yeah.
there are people who say
I think it's a fantasy that somebody claims ancestral from 3,000 years ago to a land, and claims that to go in return on the fact that it's on the backs of those who used to live there and have been living there for thousands of years. It's fantasy.
the beauty of
If I may chime in real quick, just because I think there's some area of understanding here. Justin, I could definitely understand why, given the fact that Palestinian refugees can't return after 75 years, why seeing other populations return after 3,000 years is going to be extremely triggering. That's very understandable. And then even more so, returning and then joining an institution which has caused unimaginable harm to you and your people. So it's I at least I'm speaking for myself. I can understand why that position's triggering, and I imagine Ashriel can as well. What I think that, like, putting it in their shoes, and there might be different motivations in the Hebrew Israelite community for what they joined, but the benefit that it would provide Palestinians had none of the Israelites joined would be negligible. But the cost they would take upon themselves would be great. So it's almost like, from a purely self-interested perspective, and I think most people act out of self-interest unless they have pure abundance and they could allow for it.
I get you, Adar, but
You understand? It's like
one of the most humiliating things that's ever happened to me twice was once when I was coming back home. An Ethiopian Jew looked at me and said, "What are you doing here? Why are you coming to this country?" Okay, an Ethiopian Jew whose father and probably even himself was not born there. Okay, another thing is, you know how many checkpoints I've been through where I've seen these black Hebrewites, it's soldiers, look at me like where's your papers, where's your stuff? So this is just beyond them joining the army. This is who the f gives you a right to ask me what am I doing here, or why should you cross here, or where's your paper so that you can cross this checking point? This is beyond just their institution. These are people who participate in this. Give this guy a gun, and he has a right over my land. This is crazy. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, but I've seen them. I mean, I've seen them interrogate fellow Jews just as roughly. I don't think it matters. They're just doing their job, you know.
I mean, again, that's why I say that for me, like, I understand you, Justin, because you're talking about it from an experience that you had, right? And I know that every one of us have had. I mean, we've had experience as well. I mean, my mother was deported from Israel and couldn't come back, and my brother is not able to return to Israel right now at this very moment. He was. I mean, he practically came to Israel when he was 1 year of age, and today he's 56. And he left Israel for a short period of time, and now they won't allow him to come back in. I mean, we all have, again, I have friends who were killed. We all have stories that we can be able to bring and hold on to in order to be able to try and, and corroborate our position for how we emotionally respond to a lot of these things. I don't necessarily agree with the checkpoints either. I have friends right now in Jericho who cannot move around, who used to work in the settlements in the area, but they can't do so anymore because of the war. But I've visited them, and we move around, and they've showed me a lot of the things. And I'm household visitor in their home, and they're Palestinian. I mean, so there's nuance to this, and I can understand. You may not understand it because you're looking at it. I think there's a book that's called Catch 67 by Micha Goodman, that he was speaking about the fact that when you experience, or anybody experience, humiliation due to what it is that you had experienced, and then on the flip side of it, people are doing what they're doing because there is a security necessity to do so, and that then creates a continual cycle. Why? Because imagine that there were people who, when there were no checkpoints, there were people who had come into mainland Israel and blow up on a bus and randomly kill innocent civilians. And so and it was happening for a period of time. So there was a necessity then to try and it wasn't just Israelis being targeted. There were a lot of Palestinians who were also killed, a lot of Arabs who were also killed during these periods of time. Hebrew Israelite who was killed, during these periods of time. So there is a security necessity then to be able to have these things in place. Now, each one of these cases then leads to something else that then causes you to be humiliated. Due to your humiliation, there's something that you do that causes people to be afraid. Due to that fear, they then put up roadblocks. Due to those roadblocks, you become humiliated. So there's a continual cycle, and I understand that. I'm with you. We're having a conversation on it. I understand those things. But there are also other things that you have to understand as well, that we have to understand. All of us have to, look at things from the other person's perspective and be able to try to understand it a bit better than just what is on the surface. Because I don't believe that checkpoints just existed out of nowhere. I mean, there was some context to these things. And when you take things out of context, then obviously it seems, absurd. I don't like it either. I don't like it. But the context says that was a necessity. Why? Because you look at then the amount of suicide attacks and things like that had happened after those roadblocks were put up. It was significantly lower than before the roadblocks were put up. Should the roadblocks still be there at this very point?
Did the occupation happen after the suicide bombings, or did it happen before? So I mean, where are you going to start history, man? So where the attacks started? So okay, because you're telling me that there's a reason for it. Well, there's a reason for attacks, buddy. It's called occupation. It's called displacement. So don't start history where you choose to start it, because that, again, you're mixing. Just like your history, you're screwing with my history now. Okay.
There were attacks. There were attacks in Israel prior to the establishment of the state of Israel. There were attacks in Israel.
But what I'm saying is, but you guys came. Listen.
Let me finish the point.
Which people would accept a force of foreigners to come and settle their land and displace them and not attack them? Can you give me an example in history, please?
There were. When you look at the historical when you analyze history from 1882, let's say, which was the first Aliyah, right, going forward all the way up until 1948, there were a lot of things that happened in that time frame that people absolutely ignore. Even prior to 18,
I will not ignore it. I challenge you to bring me any. The Zionists, when they came in the 1890s and the 1880s, they came with an agenda. We can go back. In the 1500s, there were attacks. In the 1600s, there were attacks. There was the riots in Hebron beforehand. All these things happened, so you can't just ignore history. Also, I'm not ignoring history, but it's you who is ignoring history. Where'd you go?
The Jerusalem riots in 1922.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is we can go back to 1895. We can go back to the Balfour Declaration. We can go. I mean, I don't understand why we're selective with history here.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Where did Ashriel go?
He's back. Ashriel, you're back. We just don't see your video now. But maybe I do want to give.
I thought the conversations got shut out.
No. If it does, it's the Mossad who shuts it down. It's the only way. Doesn't it? I do want to give other people the opportunity to engage. So let's shelf this for now. If you guys want another, and Ashriel, we could have you back anytime. But if you guys want to set up a time for just the two of you, even if it's to host a room here on Discord or do a live stream, let me know and I'd be happy to set that up. Anybody else want to chime in with a question or comment?
Yeah, I had a comment. I actually have two comments. I think the first comment is that what Ashriel is saying is that he can understand the other side, and he just wants, or we just want the other side to also understand us. And all we always hear is one-sided, victim, roadblocks, checkpoints, and but I would also like to have acknowledgement from the other side as well, why there might be, why there are checkpoints as well. So that's one thing that I would like to say. And then the second thing is, when Justin said you came to my land, I mean, at what point do you draw the line of whose land is it? Is it the most recent person? Is it the first person that was there? It's very hard, like Ashriel was saying, the Palestinian refugees right now that are 75 years later still identify with that land. Does that identification expire in 1,000 years? I mean, I would think that in 1,000 years they would still identify with that land. So if they came back in 1,000 years and there's somebody else living there and they displaced them, would they have no right to that land because they were 1,000 years before? I mean, where do you draw the line? And that's where I think we would like to hear also an acknowledgement that, the understanding of on our side as well. Like, yeah, we're not perfect what we did, but it would be nice to hear, some acknowledgement as well from our point of view.
I mean, I agree with the point Al, that you're making. My thing is, and it remains that way. When I'm looking at history and I'm viewing it from, I'm looking at it from an Israelite, a Hebrew lens, right? But at the same time, I'm looking at it from a humanity perspective. I don't have a problem with with things that are being shared. The issue always comes, and as a matter of fact, I don't even have this issue only with Palestinian side. I also have the issue also with Israeli side that say some of the same stuff. You all can't just come up with an identity and say that you're part of such and such. You're coming to Israel. This is our land. You have no rights to be here. We're going to deport you. All these things we've experienced that also on the other side. So if you're asking, I mean, we have we've experienced it from both ends, right? From both ends. So when I'm having a conversation, it's not from a an emotional point at all. And like I say, and you said it correct, Al, that if you say that my identity then is no longer relevant and it's a fantasy because it goes back a very long period of time that you feel that is outdated and irrelevant, and the question should be then, where do we start? I mean, do we start from, or where does it end? Because
Yeah, and I was referring to the Palestinians, how they feel about Jews and stuff.
that's what I was going to say. If we look at it from that perspective, then the question, for I guess for Justin and anybody else would be then, okay, so right now it's 78 years. In another 22 years, that'll be 100 years. Then in another 500 years. So in 500 years, and people, if they remain, and I hope not, but if they remain refugees and that refugee status continue to move from generation to generation because they were displaced a long time ago, some actually left, on their own. But for those who were displaced, does that mean then that in 500 years from now, or let's just go 100 years from now, in 2020, in 22 years from now, does it mean then that anybody who was a refugee no longer have any ties to this land because they have been away for so long, and so their claim then is expired, irrelevant, it becomes a fantasy at that point? I mean, I'm really trying to understand that. I mean, you can't say these things, or we can't just erase the history over the last 2,000 years that so many things happened. You had all of these foreign powers who had taken over this land, and we just act like that didn't exist, right? During the period of time that the Ottomans ruled here, that was a period of time that a lot of people actually migrated all the way up until, just a few years before the end of World War One. That was a period of time that a lot of people migrated from a lot of the nearby Arab countries.
That is
But
so untrue, by the way. But that's okay. You,
okay,
you see, it's amazing how you select certain historical counts and you neglect it. In fact,
okay,
Rafi was here just a little while ago. No, it wasn't Rafi. I'm sorry, that's David. We actually discussed this, and in fact, it was the opposite. In the 1910s, 1920s, people actually left because there was a famine. So to say that Palestinians are people who migrated from other countries, bullshit again. You
I
know,
didn't, I didn't, I didn't,
so
I
basically,
didn't say
so
that. You
not
have
only
to
so
listen. No, no,
you're
no, no, no. You
basically
have to
no,
listen. No,
no,
no. I'm
you
not gonna
said it.
tell you.
If you're
No,
gonna
no,
sit
no,
here
no.
and say
I'm not gonna
Palestinians are
cut you off.
descendants of other
No,
people and stuff, come on,
no,
dude.
no, 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 no,
Again,
no, no.
DNA test anytime. I'll take the Pepsi challenge with you anytime, buddy. Come on,
Okay.
I don't
spare
think
me.
he
So
was
again,
saying that.
what I'm saying is that, I mean, you continue to try and draw it the way you want to draw it, but I'm not moving from anything that I say, and everything that I say can be confirmed, because all throughout this period of time, okay, I'll give you, you had the Romans, then you had the Arabs, then you had the Crusades, then you had the Mamluks, then you had the Ottomans, then you had the British, then the state of Israel was established. Throughout all these periods of time, there were people who were migrating from a lot of places. I'm not saying that people didn't leave, because yeah, people left also a long time ago. This migration has always been a thing in the world. So it didn't just happen today or a few years ago. It's been happening. And so yes, there were a lot of people who had migrated from a lot of the nearby countries looking for better life, better experiences, because during the Ottoman time, in a lot of the other vassal states, it wasn't really developing the way that it was developing. Things were developing here, and so as a result, yes, a lot of people did migrate here. And so we can't just take that away. But during this entire period of time, there were people who had maintained their existence here over this very long period of time. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you another secret. Another secret is that a lot of people who actually are Arab Muslim, or who identify today as Muslim, or some as Palestinian, a lot of them identify or were of Israelite stock who were forcibly converted also. So I mean, when you look at history, we have to look at it with a broad brush. We can't just start it and end it where we want to start it and end it because it fits our narrative. My narrative is not what the Israelis are saying, not what the Palestinians are saying. My narrative is from the Israelite perspective, and I'm looking at things from both of these perspectives, and I'm understanding the historical, accounts and occurrences over these periods of time. Now, you can't tell me that there wasn't a methodical way of cleansing this land prior, way before, anybody who considered themselves Jewish or Israelite or whatever came to this land, because there were people who were being slaughtered. There were people who were being forcibly, displaced. There were people
Dude.
who were leaving
Listen.
due to.
Palestinian identity is mixed. Palestinian identity has never said that we are one or the other. Okay. When I do DNA tests, which I hope you will do someday, I find that I'm genetically close to people who are from some the Shomronim. Okay, for example,
Okay,
some
okay.
other Jewish tribes, Arab tribes, other Levantine who exist. Palestinian
I just
identity
said that
is
though.
even incorporates that. So
But
what
I
I'm
just
trying to
said
say is
that.
this. Okay, but this is something that's natural. We've embraced several of the civilizations that have come and settled on us and this. But again, does it give the right and identity? And like I said, I'm from a pragmatic point of view, I don't have an issue. But from this whole historical thing about how some people have a right over another to come back, it's ridiculous. And if Al
I
wants,
never said
see,
that.
and Al is going
I
to say,
never said that.
let's
You
flip
but you
it
can't
over and
but you
let's get
can't
it from
create
this.
a new, but you can't
The
create a new
Palestinians have
narrative
never
based on.
denied the existence of Jews on the land. We don't have that in our history. In fact, our religion embraces that
But
and
I
talks about the
said
children of
these things,
Israel.
but you can't change. I'm saying you keep shaping the narrative in a way where you trying uh, to shift shape my words. I didn't say that there was one people with one identity in this. I never said those things. As a matter of fact, I did say that there were people who had migrated here. There are people who had come from a lot of different places. There are people who had migrated from sub-Saharan Africa who today are considered Palestinian, but are Afro-Palestinian. That they came from Sudan, well, after they came from Hajj in Saudi Arabia, and then they settled here on the land, and now they're Afro-Palestinians. I mean, these are things that I'm saying. So I mean, I don't know why you're trying to shape what I'm saying, because I think I'm very, very clear. Again, I don't have any problem with your identity. I didn't say that you can't come back. I didn't say any of those things. But I know that the dominant narrative today, is that the state of Israel shouldn't exist in the minds of a lot of people. Thus, it should be dismantled, and what should be another Arab state here instead. When you say from the river to the sea, you're not talking about really just the breaking down of the institutions. You're talking about the people who are here shouldn't be here either. That's the conversation. And so, I mean, you can't have the same conversation of people who came here 70 years ago, 100 years ago, did such and such and such. And so as a result, today I feel this way, and so I think that it should also be flipped over again. No, I don't agree with that at all. My position is that everybody who's here should be able to live here in peace and in harmony. But the only time there will be peace and there will be harmony is that both sides would have security and both sides would have or feel dignity. Once both sides feel secure and there is dignity, we could then be able to live in peace. But so long as there's a continual cycle of what has been for the last 100 years and even prior to that, then we can't continue to just speak about this utopia as if it's just going to pop up and just exist. And we can't just look at everybody who's residing here in Israel, 9 million people, and say that all of these people should just get up and leave and go back to where they came from, because the great majority of the people are 5-6 generations here. So they this is where they came from. This is who they are. Even if you don't agree with that, this is where they are from, as reality is at this, pragmatically. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but you have to understand what I'm saying as well. And as long as we can disagree, but you can't just dismiss everything that I'm saying because it doesn't fit what you are trying to push. Your narrative is your narrative. Everybody else have other experiences. When we're talking about these experiences, we have the opportunity then to be able to talk about them from each of our personal experiences, but also from a universal experience for how are we expected to move forward on this plot of land for the next, let's say, for the next 50 years. What is my daughter going to experience here in the next 50 years? What do I want to see? I could describe that for you, and I can describe how I believe that it could actually, take shape, because we are the leaders of the next generation. And we will then be faced with these same questions that all the other generations were faced with, and they fail to provide a just solution going forward. And that's why we're in this shit again in 2025. Now, when we have a chance to be able to get to, the decision-making board and change things for the generations going forward, we're going to have to make some other decisions that won't include, this radical, ideology and the absolute ignoring of people's identity and history and the fabrication of a lot of things. Because let's be honest, Justin, there's a lot of fabrications also, so let's not act like these things don't exist. You know that they're fabrications. I know they're fabrications.
And let me tell you another fabrication. The fabrication that when you say that Palestinians, when they say from the river to the sea, another Arab state. See, this is you've actually embraced like colonialism, like your mentality. If you think Palestine is the same Arab state that Morocco or Iraq is, then that's like me saying all black people are alike.
Let me ask
So
you a question,
you see how you embraced this Orientalism. You basically taken the mindset of European Orientalists, and you basically established it to me. Thank you very much. You can't even identify me as a Palestinian. You're going to lump me up with another. You said another Arab country, as if an Arab from Iraq or Morocco is the same. Yeah, just like all black people are alike, right? Whether you're from Senegal or from Ethiopia, you're all the same, black, right?
No, that's black is not an identity; it's a color.
I'm sorry. Is that culturally insensitive on my house? So thank you. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. I can accept it, but you can't
that's
accept
just
it.
a fact. That's a fact.
Okay, and all
Black is
white
not an
people are
identity; it's a
alike.
color.
European,
Nobody identifies black.
an English person from England and an English-speaking person from Australia and English people all over the world are all the same, right?
No, 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 they're not. They're not. But again, I'm looking at it from I'm totally disconnecting it from emotions, because for you to say even that Morocco is an Arab country, all of these countries are basically colonized by the Arab imperialism over periods of time. None of North Africa, I mean, all of North African countries, as a matter of fact, have their own identity, their own indigenous people, but you just consider them as Arab. I mean, I don't, again, these are facts of history that you just ignoring. All of the North African countries, all of West Asia, and a lot of other countries have been colonized by Arabs and are still colonized until this very moment in time. But you consider
Colonized in
those
sense of what instead of what? Like that would be like saying Jews have colonized Europe because Jesus' religion, monotheism, is now in Europe. Did Jews colonize Europe?
So I'll explain it to you. So I'll explain it to you
That's ridiculous.
So I'll explain
I
to
think
you
what
how
he's
it
trying
happened.
to just, I think what he's trying to say is what's left over from the colonization of the Arab
Yeah, but what I'm trying
conquest.
to say is that Arabs didn't go and replace people and stuff. Their culture and their religion, okay, they spread, but that'd be like monotheism. Monotheism was not something in Europe. It came with Christianity, which came from the Holy Land. Was that? I mean, colonization. So
Well, I
Jews
mean,
colonized Europe
No,
because their religion,
no,
something
but
that came out of their religion.
Jews didn't spread Christianity like that, and they didn't
Well,
spread it by
but
force. But you can say Romans did.
like Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa spread Islam in West Africa. He wasn't
Well,
Arab.
a better argument would be that Christians colonized Europe because Christians were the ones that spread Christianity, not Jews.
Well, Christians,
And
for
it would be,
example,
and it
who
would be
were
Rome.
Jews who became Christians and later, etc. But the point is that this is what I'm trying to say is the ridiculousness of this.
So are
I
you
think it's
saying
just a
that Arabs?
misunderstanding. I think it's a misunderstanding.
No, it's a bad
I
example. That's what it is. It's not a misunderstanding. It's just a
But
very
are you
bad
saying that
historical example.
But are you saying that Arabs didn't colonize
No,
North
they
Africa,
didn't. No,
and then
no,
they
they
went
didn't.
into Spain and tried to take over Spain? I mean, what do you call that then?
The heirs from Arabia.
Yeah,
Are you
but
saying that the heirs from
first of all,
Arabia didn't?
the Arabs from Arabia were not capable of that. Okay, and when these countries
Come on,
expanded, so
man.
it's,
Come on, bro. I mean,
When,
I
when,
think we're having a conversation. I think, in this conversation, I think we should, and that's why I'm not getting emotional about it. I think we should continue to stick to facts because once you start to fabricate historical facts that are very well documented,
fabricate history, dude. You got your entire existence is fabricated history. Okay, so
no
don't even get
problem.
me started on your
No problem.
fabricated
No
history.
problem. What I'm saying is that yes, Arabs have colonized a lot of these countries. It's very well documented, from the Osman and Abu Bakr. They did begin the colonization and this imperialistic idea of going from where they were and forcibly not just spreading their culture and their religion, but forcing people to either conform to it or be
So
displaced or be
the
killed.
largest Muslim country today is what country?
Indonesia.
And which Arab army landed in Indonesia and forcibly
I'm
converted
talking.
those people?
But you deflected. I'm talking about
No,
all
no,
of the North
I'm
African
talking about, but I'm talking about how West Africa, Mansa Musa and Mali and stuff, how did they become Muslims? Through force?
I'm pretty sure there were military campaigns in that
I'll jump in
region.
No,
on that.
they weren't.
I'll jump in on Indonesia. The Padri Wars were not at all peaceful, but I agree with everything else that you're saying and doing right now. So just
No,
keep going.
but those people,
Jumping on the
weren't Arab armies. They were maybe internal forces that became Muslim, but they
Yeah,
weren't.
yeah, you're
But
right. You're right. No, that's fair. That's fair.
yeah, but the fact that a group of Arabs, only the ones that are in the peninsula, carried out this worldwide expansion, they, the people who became Arabized because of language and religion later also led those campaigns, but those weren't necessarily from the Arabian Peninsula.
I mean,
Not,
They
to
would
not,
be
correct, but the conditions were created to do that, though.
okay, but
Right? The
that's the way
imperial conditions were created.
civilizations expand.
Had those
They didn't go
environments not been
replace these
created
people.
to
That's like that'll be like saying again, that'll be saying that Christianity, I mean, okay, we can say, did Jewish Christians go in and ethnically cleanse Europe? No, it didn't
I mean,
happen.
Jewish Christians never had power,
to,
but Roman Christians did.
But
to be fair,
why are you taking this so personally, Justin? I mean, two things can be true at the same time. It doesn't mean one is bad,
No,
one is good.
because I'm not saying one was bad or good, but what I'm trying to say is that it's amazing how I feel that Ashriel is literally selecting certain parts of history to justify things, like when he said about the Arab
no,
state, creating another Palestine Arab
I don't.
state,
just
and
No,
then
no, no.
saying that
That's
Arabs colonized Africa. You see, when it comes to Africa, the black issue, he's going to take this, we was the colonized people. We were the ones who were oppressed, blah, by the Arabs. And I know you people, because that's the way the Nation of Islam does the same bullshit. You guys do the same bullshit. And there's all these other groups that pick this black nationalist thing because they want to blame whatever things, historical things on whatever people. Okay,
No,
I mean,
we
you
don't have to.
basically
No, we don't have to.
incorporated that.
No. I think we're just having a conversation that is based
Yeah.
in facts. Now you're taking it
Facts.
to a different, to a different perspective. I mean, and
Facts.
again, that's on you. But the facts remain. These things are very well documented. You can't just say just because you feel
Listen,
a way that these things didn't
you can you
exist.
can you can talk about tribes. You can talk about any tribe of West
Let me finish.
Africa, but
Let me
you're
finish
linking
though.
to those tribes in West Africa are as factual as science fiction. Okay, come on, let's be honest.
Okay,
I mean,
so when somebody tells you that, I don't know, that Palestinian identity is just as fictional as